Welcome to the Daily Coffee Chat with Ryan Frank. So glad that you are here. I'm joined today by Bo Harrington from Southeast Christian Church in Louisville. Bo, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Glad to be here.
So, Bo, when did you and I first meet? I feel like it's been a while.
It's been a while. We actually first met at the Napkin Conference. I think
you're right.
Gosh, 2009. I think 2009.
I bet it. Yeah, that's been 10 years or more.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, yes, of all the places to meet.
Man, that was a fun conference.
Right. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to tell people we met online or we met in Las Vegas.
I know. Honestly, I don't know which one's better. Wow, what a crazy place to minister. Do you talk to Justin Smith much these days?
Every now and then, we still keep up a little bit. I live vicariously through him, since he's in South Florida and I'm in the Midwest. So
I think Justin and his wife, I think they're up to about 22 kids, aren't they now? Something like that.
Get their own TV show.
I think they should. They should. Well, Bo Harrington is a dear friend, and I'm so grateful that he has volunteered to join us on the Coffee Chat. Whether you're watching this on YouTube today or the podcast or Facebook, wherever you're catching it, I'm glad that you're here. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to remind you the number on the screen is a great number to text, 833-792-6372. If you have a question or recommended topic or someone that you think I would be great to hear from on the Daily Coffee Chat, please do send us a text and let us know. So, Bo, you are ministering at Southeast Christian Church in Louisville,
right?
Which is a ginormous place. I haven't been there in a while, but I was probably there last time. Did you remember Nevin Hooker? Was Nevin Hooker there was Nevin working there or going there when you?
He was not. He had already left.
Okay.
Yeah, he had already left when I came on.
I had a connection with Nevin Hooker and then Michael Chanley when they worked at Southeast Christian. Wonderful church doing amazing things. Tell us a little bit, Bo, about your ministry. Tell us about your family first and foremost, if you would, and then tell us about your ministry journey and how God has led you through some transitions and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So my family is, my wife is Amy. We've been married 23 years. 23 years.
Yeah.
Back in January, and I just celebrated 23 years of ministry just a couple of days ago. So we've been in ministry together pretty much our entire marriage, with the exception of those first 8 months. Two crazy but fun adult kids. I have a daughter that is a senior at Johnson University. She is majoring in student ministry / theology / family counseling. So
that's cool. Yeah.
She's the smart one of the family. She will have 3 degrees in 4 years.
That's crazy.
And then I have a son that is a freshman at University of Kentucky who is majoring in journalism. And so, so now
how are you old enough to have 2 kids in college?
Well, thank you. I try. That's why I shave, so you can't see the white hair. We got married young and started young. So
I love it.
As ministry people do sometimes, right?
They do. So tell us a little about your ministry journey.
Yeah.
So I Southeast. Yeah.
I've been in children's ministry for 22 of these 23 years. Started. I had no desire to go into ministry whatsoever. But my parents let me choose any college that I wanted to go to, as long as it was University of Mobile, which was a Bible college.
Yeah.
So I could go anywhere else I wanted to, as long as I went there. And really fought ministry the entire way. My major was speech. So communications with specialty in speech. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with a speech major, but hey, there you go. I guess I can talk. And so the whole time I was at Mobile during the summers, I stayed and I worked camps, like Cross Point camps, centrifuge camps. So was there doing ministry the entire summers, and that's when God started kind of planting those seeds for him. It's like this is where I want you.
Yeah.
And still fought it as one does. So my wife and I get married. My sister calls me and says, "Hey, my church kids pastor just left. I think you should apply." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think so." She said, "No, I really think you should."
Mm-hmm.
So we did, and it's hilarious to look back on it now. My wife and I were talking about like, "Oh, well, okay, this is where God wants us to go," and we're like, "But I got to make more money than I am working my secular job, because and." So what does God do? I'm like, I put that limit. I'm like, I've got to do at least this. God's like, okay, fine. How about this? And we're like, well, we'll take that. And then it just developed just a love of children's ministry. I've never been the fun kids pastor. I've always been the kind of the boring, serious one. But I have such a heart for just developing people. I love to see people grow, and then in turn use those gifts to serve the next generation. That's just what really gets me excited. So we mentioned Michael Chanley just a few minutes ago. We met in 2009 at the Napkin Conference, and just developed a real friendship. So God had moved us to Illinois and developed an incredible ministry there. And then we went to North Carolina. When we were in North Carolina, Michael calls me and says, "Hey, my church is hiring an elementary pastor. Are you interested?" I'm like, "No, it's a big church. Not really. I'm a little small town guy. I'm like, not really interested in going to a church bigger than my town." So he called me late, about another month or so, and he was hosting a conference at Southeast. So I went just to serve him and just to help him out, and just hang out with him. Really was a great excuse for a couple of days. And he introduced me to the children's pastor, and we started talking. I called my wife and said, "I think I was just interviewed for a job."
Now, who was the children's pastor at the time?
Steve Young was the children's pastor at the time.
Okay, yeah.
And so she's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah," because we spent several hours really talking about philosophy of ministry and kind of my development and my ministry path. And so that was in March. A couple of months later, I get a phone call from HR like, "Hey, are you still kind of interested in talking about this position?" And I'm like, "Well, sure. Yeah, let's kind of figure this out." And then they brought me on. So that's kind of how I got to Southeast.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Well, you've always been you talked earlier about you've never been like the fun kids pastor guy, which
right.
may or may not be true. I don't know. You're probably more fun than you think. But you are an organizer, you're a systems guy.
Very much. Yes.
Tell us about the importance. I feel like a lot of children's pastors and youth pastors lack in this area of getting organized and putting good systems in place. Why have you found this to be so important?
Well, you will never be able to take your ministry further than you are, than your own leadership, and as a kids pastor, I never wanted to be the leadership lid for my ministry. So I just kept reading, kept growing, and kept studying and inviting coaches. I've had several coaches, some business coaches, but then some ministry coaches throughout the years in my life, because I don't want to be that lid. And then really understanding how when it's not dependent on me, when I'm developing the other people, the ministry can go so much farther. So when we set up a system to where they're not relying on you for the answers, because they understand the vision of the church, they understand the vision of the ministry, then they began to make decisions on their own. So now the decisions aren't dependent on me and my own thoughts and my own background. Oftentimes when we go to a different church, they know their community because you're coming into a community.
Yep.
So for me to come into a community and say, this is the right way to do ministry in this community when I'm brand new, that's in my mind, that's really hubris. So you set up a system so you're growing the people who are already in that community and then that already understand it. And so then they can say, well, this is really what our community needs, especially when it comes to discipling our kids or developing other leaders.
What are a few of the most important, if you feel like you've had all these years in children's ministry, for someone that maybe feels like I'm not super organized, or we've got a good ministry, but I don't know if we have a lot of systems in place. What are a few of the key systems like you've got to get right, you think, as a children's pastor? What comes to mind?
So the number one system that you've got to get right is develop a leadership team.
I agree.
Right.
Yep.
So find the people who are truly invested in the ministry. I didn't say that have been there the longest. I said the ones that are truly invested in the ministry and truly have a heart for ministry. Look for the other pastors in the room. When I say pastors, I don't mean people on staff. I mean the volunteers. Look for them in the room and begin to develop them. Give them articles. Don't just say, "Hey, check out this article." Give them an article and then follow up and have a conversation with them. Say, talk to them. Let's talk about this.
That's good.
And really begin to invest in pour them. That's got to be the number one thing.
I think you're right, Bo. I think Andy. I always quote Andy Stanley saying that developing leaders or leadership development is your number one priority.
Right.
And I think it is, but it's difficult for a lot of us because a lot of kids pastors are bivocational, or maybe they feel like I'm spinning so many plates, I can barely keep up with everything I've got going on at home and at work and at the ministry. How do I find time to develop leaders? But I love what that example you gave is something simple, like, hey, you find a good article online, or somebody you find a good video clip online or something, you share it, and then follow up. Hey, what do you think about that? What did you learn from it? Something as simple as that is a way that you can develop leaders. It doesn't have to be super, super complex. I think sometimes we overthink it. Don't you, Bo?
Oh, definitely. We definitely are. We think if we can't have a group of people in a room and feed them a meal and talk at them, then we're not developing them.
Exactly. Bo, do you feel like you were born like organized with a mind to like create systems and stuff, or is it something that you've grown in or developed? Is it a little bit of both?
I think it's something that I have definitely grown in, because I am. I've never been I haven't always been the smartest person in the room, but I have always
That's
been.
what Michael Chanley and everybody always has told me.
Like,
yeah.
I've never been
Bo's not the smartest guy in the room, but he's a good guy. That's what they always say.
Exactly right.
I'm just kidding.
Smartest, but I have been the one who will work the hardest. So I'm gonna work hard, and then I noticed out of that I had to set up systems for myself. I'm an Enneagram 5, and so I love just to research and nerd out everything now. So just continually just reading and listening and reading and listening.
I love that.
When I say listening to podcasts and to other people. So yeah. But also think systems is the best way to organize a children's ministry, especially for bivocational. If you have someone who's working on the weekend, but then they're working, Monday through Friday somewhere else, they have to be organized. You have to be organized to make sure that all your processes are in place.
You're right. I've got a book. I'm over here on my shelf. Let me grab it real quick. This is a good one, Bo, that you would like if you've never read it, by Sam Chan, Bigger, Faster Leadership. Have you heard of this book? Okay. But definitely a good one to read. And his point in the book is that every pastor, every leader, every ministry leader, they want their ministry to grow, and they want it to grow fast. But his point is that your ministry or your organization will only grow to, or here's what he says. He says, the size and speed of your organization is determined by its systems and structures. So your systems being just what we're talking about, the systems we have in place, your structure, your people. And everybody wants their business to grow. Everybody wants their church to grow. You want your children's ministry to grow, but don't overlook you're only going to grow to, like you just said, you mentioned earlier, being the lid at the top, that lid. You've got to develop systems. You've got to develop people, or your capacity is going to stay small.
Right.
This book is Sam Chan's book, Bigger, Faster Leadership. Definitely recommend it to everybody that's watching or listening. Bo, in our last few minutes, I intended on spending a majority of our time talking about this other topic, but I think this systems talk has been good, and it's helped me, and I hope it's helped a lot of you. There's a lot of talk today about discipleship of kids. There's always new research coming out on what's the best methods for discipling the next generation. How do we best equip mom and dad and partner with the church parent partnership in child discipleship? A lot of talk around discipleship. But Bo, I think one thing that you're passionate about is making sure that you focus on the tactics of what's it actually going to look like to disciple kids. Talk to us about that. Right.
So, but for me, there's a difference between discipleship and disciple making. So I want to make sure that all my leaders in my ministry are actively involved in both. So discipleship, they are in a surrounding, they're in a setting where they are learning, they're growing, they're being fed, but then they are also being disciple makers. They're whether it be the other leaders within, if it's a team leader, that they are discipling their leaders, even discipling their kids also. So it's really setting up that system with that. One of the funny things, and I kind of came to this a couple of years ago when I was just incredibly frustrated at a conference. I kept hearing, you got to disciple your leaders. You've got to disciple your leaders. And a question was asked to a panelist, and they said, how do I disciple my leaders? And I said, take them to coffee, spend time with them. And I thought, and do what?
Yeah, that's it.
But they never answered the question.
It's got to be more than that, doesn't it, Bo?
Right. So then I really kind of started, again, back to my Enneagram 5, the nerd in me, I really started studying, like, well, what does this mean? And so I started thinking through, like, relational intelligence. Like, you've got to know how to form relationships. Having a conversational intelligence, like how to actually have conversations. You'd be surprised that people don't know how to actually have conversations. You can't disciple someone if you can't have a conversation with them, which involves listening and asking questions. And so as I think about developing leaders, there's a leadership development piece to that, but it's also a disciple making piece also. So breaking down these conversation intelligence, relational intelligence, the emotional, like, okay, let's see how Jesus did this with his disciples. He had so many conversations with them. They didn't know that they were being discipled, as we would say today. But then as they, Jesus sends them off, they can recall that. So like, it's not sitting down across at your favorite coffee shop. So I'm going to disciple you today.
That's it.
It's living their lives just as Jesus did. But the same thing holds true for kids also. Not accepting the question when you're given the curriculum, you read your questions, not accepting just the answers that the kids give you. It's obviously there is there's growth in that, with your kids, there's development. So you really have to lean on that information that you have where that kid is. But especially, you take a 4th, 5th, 6th grade kid, you can ask them to kind of unpack a little bit more of their answer.
Can't you? Yeah.
Based on their development. But you're going to understand that child's development, or a small group leader understand that child's development if the kids pastor has invested in them and has taught them. So it's you really begin to see that whole circle.
I love that. That's good. I think you would agree, Bo. Part of discipleship making with kids, you really do need to have good curriculum because it's kind of a roadmap. But just ordering a good quarterly curriculum and dispersing it to your leaders is not enough, is it? There really does need to be more than that. And I love what you just touched on. A lot of it, you got to build those relationships. You got to have those conversations. You've got to allow kids to ask questions. Mm-hmm. You need to be asking questions and engaging in conversations based upon how they answer your questions. I think this is a topic that we could really discuss more as a community, is how well are we creating or making disciples in our ministry? Are we really making disciples? Do we think we are, but we're really not? By the way, let's wrap up with this one, because it might be good, Bo. How would I assess? Do you feel like, if I'm a kids pastor or youth pastor, how do I assess, am I making disciples or am I just going through the motions? Thoughts on that?
Right. So I think a key with that is, what is our job as a disciple? Mm-hmm. Is to make disciples, right? So if I see within my children's ministry, my kids coming back each week, just reciting the memory verse or telling me what they learned last weekend, if those are the stories that are coming back to me, then I understand, well, I'm creating learners. I'm creating, developing children who learn facts. And maybe if they've grown up in church, it maybe becomes rote to them. If I've got kids who are coming back each week, say, hey, I invited my friend to church with me. Or, hey, I was talking to my friend about Jesus. Then we start to kind of click in.
Yeah.
That's doing something in this kid's life, and we are actually making disciples. But then the same thing with our leaders also. We've got to be discipling our leaders, and not just
good point.
Just because, they're an adult, they're breathing, they passed the background check, they can lead kids. We've got to disciple them also, because they can't make a disciple if they're not they're not growing. They're not going to make it a disciple within those circles also.
Well, do you ever recommended somebody that is watching or listening that's just really intrigued them? This has really captivated their spirit or their heart. You've recommended book, website. Does anything come to mind, like, hey, if you really want to think about discipleship making, either with kids or families, anything come to mind?
Yeah, there's a book that it's called 4-Chair Discipling, Dan Spader.
Yeah.
Which is really good. I've read that book several times over the last several years. I almost have it memorized by now, but it's really good, because he breaks down what the four chairs of disciple making, and really kind of sets a good path of helping identify where people may be in their spiritual journey. And then just asking your leaders, hey, what is your next step with Jesus? We all have the next step with Jesus.
That's right.
So asking your leaders that question, hey, what's your next step with Jesus? Don't think just because they're a member of your church, or they're your leader, they don't have a next step, because they have that next step also.
They do. Man, that's good. So repeat the name of that book one more time.
4-Chair Discipling.
We'll put the link, Andy, to 4-Chair Discipling in the show notes.
Yep,
Bo, thank you so much for doing this. You're a busy guy, but I know you love ministry leaders and pastors, and so thank you for taking some time out of your schedule.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and anytime, I'm always happy to serve this incredible community.
Well, you're awesome. Let me know if I can serve you too, Bo. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Friends, it's Bo Harrington. I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation around systems, which I didn't plan on taking the conversation there. I'm glad we did. And then also discipleship, disciple making, when you think of your leaders and your kids in your ministry. What a great coffee chat. There's more coming. We'll be back again tomorrow. Quick reminder that the Parenting in Coronaville workshop has released. Get information about that at kidsmatter.com. Put a Z in there, kidsmatter.com. This is a 1 hour on-demand workshop that you share with all the families in your church. You can share the audio, the video, the reproducible workbooks. We have a promo video, social graphics. Use as little or as much as you like. The idea is for you to help your families during these crazy times. The Parenting in Coronaville workshop for $95, you get a church license, and you can share that training with every family in your church. Parents are desperately looking to the church and to you for help, and here's a tool that you can use to help them. Friends, thanks for joining me today on the Daily Coffee Chat. If you miss any of these, you can find them at the Ryan Frank Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also access it at kidsmatter.com, because the Ryan Frank Podcast is part of the Kids Matter Podcast Network. Friends, thanks for joining me. Thanks again to Bo Harrington. And let's keep the conversation rolling in Kids Matters, I Love Kidmin, Facebook community through the day. See you tomorrow.